and give you a few announcements. I need to make a few explanations, just a few things. Hold on. That's wrong. There we go. Okay. It's just some little buddy. All righty. So Donna's going to speak on Cuckoo Land in just a moment. National Library Week is going to be Tuesday the 5th, Wednesday the 6th, and Thursday the 7th. Of April. Okay. Not this month, but next month. The thing is, we usually do 5 days, but with being able to get authors, and then we needed to move the murder mystery, and we moved it to the 9th of April. We thought that 3 days of authors or speakers, and then the murder mystery on that Saturday would certainly fill a week up for us. So we have Marla Markin speaking on the Santa Fe Trail, and she's she's going to act it out and tell us about Pennsylvania history. It's a really great presentation. And then Bob Wilhelm is going to speak on war clouds on the high plains and its history of Kansas. And then Marilyn Holt is going to be talking about Confessions of Mr. Roosevelt. So those are all different books and or presentations. And they'll be at the normal time. We'll have lunch. But just so you know, it's going to be 3 days, a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Okay? Next thing out of that you need to know is our murder mystery is on April 9th. Tickets will probably go on sale next week. We haven't determined the prices yet because we have to get back to our caterer, see what they're charging, because you know, with all the prices going up, we have to make sure that our prices stay in line with the cost of what the tickets are. So, and still make a little bit of money. So it won't be too much probably of an increase, but just to make sure we're at least breaking even or making a little bit of money. So that'll go on sale probably next Wednesday after our friends meeting, which is Tuesday. And then Judy starts Play with Purpose, and this is for ages 1 to 3, and those are for little ones. And it's a great way for parents or caregivers to take their kids and do all kinds of activities, playing and enjoying playing together and learning. Kind of, I would call it Montessori type. It's really an excellent program. They can bring all the kids in the family that are at home, but you have to sign up to so you know how to family. Great. It's a great learning experience. And then she has baby labs, and that's from 0 to 18 months, and mom or caregiver, grandparents, we got grandparents bring the babies, and do lapses, sing songs, read books, and do rhymes. It's just a grand time, and Judy's wonderful at it. So you will see your child grow within the 5-week session. Each week, you will see them learn something new or act in a new way. The little one, you'll just begin to see them blossom. And then, of course, story time continues, and we'll go until April. And that one is not, you don't have to sign up for that one. And then also coming soon, probably about April, the Kansas State Parks is offering libraries the ability to give people free passes. You go to the library, you ask for a free pass for the park you want to go to, and we give it to you. We fill it out or do whatever, and you go. And so that'll probably start in April. I haven't gotten any of the passes yet, and I haven't seen exactly how it will work. But I figure if you want to go to something in the east, you'll tell us, and we'll put the day when you think you're going to go there. You know? So you don't have to have a library card. You just have to be someone who lives in the area that wants to go to a park. Okay. So that will be here. It'll be all the way through December 2022. Okay. And then if you know anybody that needs English classes, we have ESL classes. Right now we have a lot of Spanish speakers, but if we happen to have someone who doesn't speak Spanish, doesn't speak English from another culture, that's okay, because Vi speaks both English and Spanish, and she's good at using sign language. We still have a book club going on, and it'll be next Monday. We're going to be reading Made in China. It's a nonfiction. This month we're reading Suli by John Grisham. So we read a lot of different things. And then our poetry group will meet Normally, the third Thursday of the month, this month it'll be the second because the third is spring break and I have to be out of town. And then our science fiction book club this month is reading this book. They read a lot of great things. And I know there are really some good participants. And Katie Schmidt, she's one of our librarians, and she runs the book club. So if you want to be part of that, let me know. And then 1,000 books for kindergarten. You too can read with your grandchildren over Facebook or over Messenger or however you want to do it. And write down the books you read with them. They can give incentives and read 1,000 books before they go to kindergarten.
You don't write it down. You need to.
Oh, that's true. You're right. You don't write it down. Sorry. You put it on a little phone app. You got it all recorded. It's great. Okay. So teach you. And then our youth activity center is down here between 2:30 and 5:30 every day when the school's out and we can't be open for some reason. We'll let you know. And then we have a writers club if you want to write a book or write a memoir or something like that. A lot of people, I know Lily's part of it, aren't you, Lily? And they're in the middle of writing. People that are attending there the first and third Tuesday at 2 p.m. here. And then, of course, if you want to check out digital books for Hoopla or Sunflower, you can do that by having a library card. And then remember that you can always get note cards from the library, $5 for a set of 6. Great deal. All righty. And then remember, also, if we get another snowstorm or something, which we may need some either rain or snow, but if it gets to be weather where we can't be open, check on Facebook or check our website, and we'll put a notice up where we're open and closed. Okay. All righty. So let me invite Donna Henry up to speak on Cloud Cuckoo Land.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you all for coming, especially on such a beautiful day. Had we known it was going to be nice like this, we could have had our lunch outside. That would be nice. Even more work for Melanie, but I decided first I wanted to tell you why I chose Cloud Cuckoo Land to review. I was all set to review American Dirt, and then I read Cloud Cuckoo Land, and I thought this is such a good book. It's an interesting blend of historical fiction and modern fiction and science fiction. And Anthony Doerr, who wrote this book, he also wrote All the Light We Cannot See, which is historical fiction set in World War II. But he does a really masterful job of blending all of those things together. And he does that with the use of an ancient Greek novel called Cloud Cuckoo Land, which appears in all 3 of the timelines. And the reason that I chose this book, one reason, especially as I look around the room and I see so many book lovers in this room. In the author's note, he writes that Cloud Cuckoo Land is a paean to books. It's an homage to the power of stories, and the power of stories that helps to teach us things. It helps to take us to a new place. The book becomes so real that you think maybe it's in your real life. And I thought, I really like that, and that would be a great book to discuss at Book for Lunch. It also is a tribute to libraries and librarians. So I thought it was really, really a good thing. Another thing that I love when, I'm sure all of you can think of a book, or probably more than one, that you read and you thought, wow, this changed my life. This changed the way I looked at things. And one book that I read that became so real that it almost became part of my life, I thought. My very first year teaching, I was teaching down in Winona, Kansas at Tri-Plains. And in my off hours, when I wasn't teaching and coaching, which wasn't very many hours, I was reading The Stand by Stephen King. And those of you who have read that book know that there is a plague in that book that kills 99.4% of the world's population. And the plague is called Captain Trips. And it starts as a common cold. So people begin to sneeze, cough, have runny noses. And so I was up in front of my class teaching one day, my middle school class, and I'm just teaching away. And all of a sudden, one of my kids over here sneezes. And I thought, Captain Trips. And I thought, Donna, it's just the book you're reading. But I love it when when you're so into a book that you forget that it's just a book. And so this book, I think, is one of those books, and the reason he wrote it was to pay tribute to books like that. What's interesting, I think, too, about this book is that the ancient Greek text, which is called Cloud Cuckoo Land in this novel, is actually based on a real book. Anthony Dorr did, in his research for this book, he found a book called, or he actually heard of a book, it's more than 1,800 years old, but it no longer exists. It's called The Wanders of Tulle. And it is an ancient Greek novel that's a story about a journey around the world. And so he thought, well, that would be neat to include that in this book. So he actually he made Cloud Cuckoo Land to be just like The Wonders of Tulle. And in his author's note, he wrote, according to Photius, who's a Greek scholar, Diogenes claimed in a preface that The Wonders was actually a copy of a text discovered centuries before by a soldier in the armies of Alexander the Great. The soldier, Diogenes said, had been exploring the catacombs beneath the city of Tyre when he discovered a small cypress chest. On top of the chest were the words, stranger, whoever you are, open this to find what will amaze you. And when he opened it, he found, engraved onto 24 cypress wood tablets, the story of a journey around the world. So he took that actual real novel and he put it into this. And he even has the author of it as Antonius Diogenes, who was the real author of The Wonders of Tulle. So I thought that was really clever. Okay, so before we start talking about the book, I want to explain the cards that are at your places. As a former teacher, I know that it pays to have your listeners be engaged, so you're not thinking about what you're going to be doing later. So as we navigate through the book, I have a word search here, and then in the book there's a very important riddle, and so the clues to the words are part of my homage to a riddle. And so as we go through the sections, we'll be doing that as well. And Melanie has this up here for me, and I'll show you what words they are and how they spell and how you can find them before we get started into that. Okay, so first I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the Greek novel, Cloud Cuckoo Land, that is the basis that goes into all three of the timelines in this book. So in our novel, Antonius Diogenes, he tells his niece that he found this novel, this text, this ancient manuscript in a cave, just like The Wonders of Tulle, and that it was engraved on tablets. It has 24 sections. What he really did was he wrote this story for his niece who is dying. And he wanted to give her something to take her mind off of her situation, off of her fate. So he creates this story of Ethan, who is a poor shepherd boy who aspires, he does not want to be a boy, a shepherd boy, he wants to be a bird. And so he goes, and it's such a clever little mythical story. And so he goes through and tries to find a way to become a bird. And as he's going along, his first transformation, he's just sure he's found someone that can turn him into a bird, that he's turned into a donkey. Now, while he's in donkey form, he is a human inside the donkey. He knows he's human, but he has to live as a donkey. And then eventually he thinks he finds another way to be transformed. And he's transformed into a fish. And he has to live his life in the belly of a giant fish and with all these other creatures. Eventually he does become a crow. And his whole reason he wants to be a bird is because up in the sky, there is Cloud Cuckoo Land. And Cloud Cuckoo Land is a city in the sky where everyone gets to eat honey cakes whenever they want to, and they get to live this idyllic life. And so that's what he wants to do. So this story is interspersed within the three timelines of the actual novel. So it sounds complicated, but it's not really, okay? So let's start with the three timelines. The first timeline is in the 15th century, which would be the 1400s. And I'm going to look at my card and read the first clue, and that's going to take us that's going to give us the setting. What was the capital city of the Byzantine Empire, later renamed to Istanbul? Does anyone know the answer to that? Constantinople. Very good. I knew you guys would get this. Okay. So this is how you spell it. Now, see if you can find it in the word search. I'll give you a clue. It's diagonal. It's a diagonal. Once you find it, holler. You found it? And, okay, very good. We have a winner in the first row. Okay, so it's the very top left second letter, and it goes Constantinople down through the bottom, okay? So in Constantinople, in the 15th century, there are two characters that are pivotal to the plot. The first character is Anna, and when we first meet Anna, she's 8 years old. She's going to age to about 13 throughout the storyline. And she and her sister Maria are orphans. They've been taken in by the widow Theodora, and they're being taught how to be seamstresses. They sew for a wealthy man. And so they're living in the house of the wealthy man, and they're sewing for him. Now, Maria, her older sister, Anna's older sister, is a fabulous seamstress and can sew anything. But Anna, or not so much. She's a tomboy. She wants to be outside. And so the widow Theodora realizes this because she says, I can't teach this girl anything. I teach her a stitch and she forgets it the next day. So she sends her out on errands a lot. And so Anna, through that, gets to know the city of Constantinople very well, which comes to her aid. Because a little bit later in the story, Maria has a very severe head injury. And at times she cannot see, she gets very dizzy, she's disoriented, and she's very, very fearful. And they hear that mercury can be an antidote or a cure for this. And so what Anna begins to do is she begins to try to think of things she can steal to get money to buy mercury for her sister. And so her favorite thing to steal, chickens. So she's out stealing chickens one day, and a boy catches her. And he says, hey, I'm going to turn you into the authorities if you don't help me with what I want to steal. So she says, okay, she has to do it. So, so on foggy nights, she goes down the bay and she meets him at the bay, and he has a boat. And he rows across the bay to an abandoned monastery. And he says, in this monastery, there are treasures. We can get those treasures and take them back to Constantinople, sell them, and become rich. And she thinks, well, this is great. I can get mercury for my sister. So her job, he has to keep the boat in the water. Her job is to climb the walls of the monastery, jump over, go in, go through each room. It's been abandoned for a lot of time, and see what she can find. Well, mostly what she finds are old manuscripts or old texts. Some of them are called codexes. So she finds these, and when they get back to town, they go right to the wealthy man's house where the scholars are, and they look at what they have, and they either buy them or don't, depending on. But usually they're pretty valuable, so they're making money at this. Okay, so this takes us to our second riddle. What plant material was used as thick paper in ancient times? Papyrus. Very good. So that's how you spell it. And it is a vertical one, I think, isn't it? Yeah. Did everybody find it already? You guys are quick. Yeah, it's the very first letter on the top, and you go down, papyrus. So a lot of these ancient texts or manuscripts they're on papyrus or some other materials, but a lot of them are a little bit deteriorated. They've maybe gotten wet, they've gotten dirty. So the scholars have to decide if they're worthy of buying them. And so sometimes they buy them, sometimes they don't. Eventually, Anna ends up with a copy of Cloud Cuckoo Plant, which is this ancient Greek novel or text. She doesn't know what it is yet because she can't read Greek, and it's written in Greek. So she has to find a tutor. And at first the tutor refuses to teach her. And I bet you can guess why. She's a female. So he says, no, I'm not teaching you, you're a girl. But she convinces him through her persistence and her intelligence that she's worthy of teaching. So he begins to teach her the Greek letters, and she begins to translate Cloud Cuckoo Plant. Okay, so then that takes us to the other character in this storyline, Omir, who is a woodcutter's son who lives out in the country, pretty far away from Constantinople, a couple of days travel from Constantinople. And he was born with a cleft palate. And because of that, if anything bad, if they're living in a village, if anything bad happens, he's blamed for it because they thought it was a curse to be born with a cleft palate. So his family's chosen to move out to the forest and they live pretty isolated. And Omir has 2 huge oxen that he is trained from birth, and they listen to him only. And so this comes into play in the story because further away, there is a sultan who has decided he wants Constantinople. He's going to invade Constantinople. And so his armies have been moving toward Constantinople. And as they're moving toward Constantinople, they come across Omir and his oxen. Well, they need big oxen because the Sultan has one of the very first cannons, and they're transporting this big cannon, and the cannonballs are made out of granite, and they're so heavy, so they can't put them on, you know, like a donkey or a horse or anything. They have to have the larger oxen. So because of this, they draft him basically. They make Omir come with him. And he travels along. He has to be very careful. He always tries to wear a hood, tries to shade his face, because he knows that if something happens along the way that is bad, he will be blamed for it. But as long as he can control his oxen, he's okay. So they're on the march to Constantinople. And Anna, as she's translating her story, she begins to read the story to her sister, because her sister can hear, they hear all these rumblings about this approaching army, and her sister's very, very scared, and she's having times where she can't see, she's just so scared. So just by chance, she thinks, maybe if I read her this story, she'll calm down. So she starts to read Cuckooland and Ethan's story of wanting to become a bird, and it calms Maria down. And so it's an impetus for her to keep translating and keep reading it, because it keeps her calm. And so she reads this story to her as we go, and she's translating it. And so you get to kind of read the translation as you go along. You get to kind of see that translation. So eventually, the Sultan's army is right outside. And Maria says, what are we gonna do? You know, we have to keep going, like Ethan did. We can't give up. And so Anna has to decide, is it important to stay in Constantinople? If their walls are breached by the cannonballs, her life as she knows it will be over. She'll be taken as a slave. Does she risk trying to escape? And so she and Omir's paths are going to cross. And that's where I'm going to stop with that timeline. Okay? But the Cuckooland was a very important part of that story, because it helped Maria get through the tough times. Okay, the second timeline. Let's look at clue number 3. What Northwestern state is known, should have an N on it, for mountainous terrain and is experiencing an influx of new residents from California? Idaho. I thought someone might say Colorado, but Idaho is, all these people are running into Idaho. Okay, so that's how it's spelled, of course. And has someone found it? Yeah. Yep. Okay, it's also vertical. A lot of these are vertical. So Idaho, it's in the second line and then down. So the second setting is in Lakeport, Idaho. And this is part of the modern fiction. It takes place from about the 1940s to 2020. And again, 2 important characters. Zeno Innes is the first one. Zeno is of Italian descent. He and his father moved to Lakeport. His mother is deceased. He and his father moved there so his father could work in the mines. And it's a tough life for Zeno, because he looks so different. Most of the people who live in Lakeport are of Norwegian descent, so they're blonde and fair-skinned. And here he comes with his dark hair and dark eyes. And plus he's poor. And so he doesn't feel like he really fits in. He and his father move into town. His father becomes acquainted with a widow there in Lakeport, and they eventually move in with her, which is good because she serves as a mother figure to Zeno, basically until her death. But one thing he finds in Lakeport is a Lakeport public library. And he doesn't have a place to belong. He doesn't fit into school. He feels very isolated, very alone. But he goes up to and at that time, the library was like in an old house. And he's looking in the window, and one of the librarians opens the door, and she says, "It's too cold for you to be out here. Where is your mother?" And he says, "My mother's dead." So they take him in. There are 2 librarians at the time, and they just lavish attention on him and care on him, and they give him books to read. And the Lakeport Public Library becomes a place of refuge for him. And he loves it there. And so he goes whenever he can. And his father, even though he is an immigrant, decides that he wants to fight in World War II. And so he leaves for World War II, and Zeno stays with the widow. And like I said, she serves as a mother figure for him. He never really fits in Lakeport. And so as he gets older, he's looking for a way to fit in or to make a difference. Well, about that time, something happens that he feels like he can be a hero in, which is clue number 4. What war did the U.S. participate in as part of the United Nations from 1950 to 1953? Korean War, exactly. So his father joined World War II to become a hero. So Zeno thought maybe he would do that too. Okay, this also is a vertical one. So I think most of you found it. I'll show you where it is. It's in the second line, second letter over and down. So he goes to the Korean War. He enlists and he's sent to Korea, and very quickly he becomes a prisoner of war at a war camp. And you would think this would be a horrible time in his life, but it actually is one of his happiest times. Yes, he's being starved and he has to work long hours and the conditions are terrible, but he needs a friend. There's a British soldier there, Rex, that he becomes very close to, and Rex is a Greek scholar. And so he begins to teach Zeno the Greek alphabet. They don't have paper, so they have to draw it in the dirt. And so when they're out supposed to be looking for things, scavenging for berries or whatever, they're actually out learning the Greek alphabet. And so the time that he's in the prisoner of war camp, he's pretty happy, even though he's a prisoner of war, because he finally feels like he's accepted and seen. Well, the Korean War ends. He comes back to Lakeport. He does eventually go visit Rex in London, but he decides London's not the place for him for several reasons. He comes back to Lakeport. He spends his whole life in Lakeport. He continues to be involved in the library. When he visits Rex, Rex says, hey, I am translating these ancient Greek texts. Maybe you'd like to do this. And it kind of reawakens his love of the Greek language. So he gets a copy of Cloud Cuckoo Land, and he begins to translate it. And as he ages, he's still involved with the library. And one day the librarian comes to him and says, by this time he's in his 80s, she says, I have this group of fifth graders that just causes so many problems. I bet that never happens here, does it? Is there something you can do? Do you think they would be interested in this book you're translating? He says, well, I doubt it. Try. So he starts reading them, and they're fascinated by it, and they love it. And they say, Mr. Ennis, can we make this a play and present it to the community? And he says, I would love that. And so they make a set and they do a script, and so a big part of the storyline is all the preparations for this, okay? And for the big reveal of Cloud Cuckoo Land. The other character who's important in this timeline is Seymour. Now he's born a little bit later in the 2000s because he's a teenager in 2020. Dora doesn't tell us exactly what his medical condition is, but he is overwhelmed by sensory stimulus. So if there's a lot of noise, it just makes him so antsy, sometimes makes him violent. And so he and his mother, Bunny, live in a trailer out in the woods. And she discovers that if she can muffle all that sensory information coming in, it calms him. So he wears like earmuffs everywhere he goes. And so he also feels very isolated from other children and also they know that they can kind of trigger him if they do things to him. So he also becomes a resident of the Lakeport Public Library, and it's also a refuge for him. And Marion, who's the head librarian at the time, will help him look up information on owls because he loves the outdoors. And there's a gray owl that resides close to his house that he watches all the time. And so she helps him look up information. Like she finds that for every 27,000 Americans, there's one gray owl. And that shows him, wow, my trusty friend is rare. And he loves it. So he spends a lot of time in the library. In fact, Marion even makes in their book receptacle where you can put the books in, she makes it an owl so that it's like a tribute to Seymour. And so he loves the library. About this time, they started developing the land around Seymour's family's trailer. And they're trying to make housing developments. He doesn't want this because he wants, you know, the land to stay and all the wildlife. And so as he's moving through this process, he tries to protest. He tries different ways of stopping the development. He can't stop it. So eventually he decides to turn to violence. And so his path is going to cross with Zeno's path. I'm not going to tell you more about that, but Seymour is, by the end of the timeline, you will see that he is a good person, that he redeems himself, but he just doesn't know what else to do. He has to stop the development to save the wildlife. Okay, so then that takes us to our third timeline and our fifth question, riddle. What is a common name for an interstellar vehicle? Spaceship. Okay, it is spaceship. Yeah, it's also vertical. So it's the letter is the last letter on the second line, and it goes down, spaceship. Okay, so our third, here comes the science fiction part, which is fascinating. Argos is a spaceship that's full of humans that are traveling from Earth to another planet that is similar to Earth. And it's so far away that the people who are on the Argos, many of them entered as young people, are now middle-aged. Some of the children were born on the Argos. So it's taking them this long to get to this other place. And in this setting, there's Constance, who is 9 when we meet her, and her family, and they're the important characters. And then there's Sybil, who is the computer that runs the spaceship. She's kind of like Alexa or Siri. And she has the answer to every question they say. And so they can say, you know, Sybil, you know, how far from Colby, Kansas is Constantinople? And she could immediately tell. She also can protect their environment. So if something happens to the spaceship, like if they have a boiler problem in one area, she can shut down that spaceship, that part of the spaceship. So she's very powerful, Sybil is. She does all of the lessons for the children, monitors their lessons. She tells them when it's time to go to bed. They have no light, which is like nighttime here. And she dims the lights, and she brings the lights up at the day. When we meet Constance, she's 9. And her father, his connection to Cloud Cuckoo Land, he doesn't have the actual manuscript. He doesn't have a translation, but he's read it. And she doesn't know how he's read it, but he knows the stories. So as she's been growing up, he's been reciting the stories of Egon and becoming a donkey and how that was. And so she knows the whole story. Okay, so Constance, when she turns 10, they have Library Day, which is everyone that turns 10 gets to go to the library. It's not an actual library. What they do is they get on a perambulator, which is like a treadmill, and they walk on it, and they have a virtual reality headset on. And when they do that, it takes them to the virtual library, which looks like a room like this, or the library upstairs. But Sybil is also in the library. So they can say, Sybil, give me the book, you know, a certain book, American Dirt, and they can get the book. So what's neat about this is it broadens their horizon so much because they've been in the spaceship all the time. In the library, adults and children can research anything. They can play virtual reality games. So it takes them, gives them that exposure to other things rather than just the Argos itself, okay? So an important part of the library is riddle number 6. What is the name of a book of maps or charts, or the name of the Greek titan who supported the heavens? Atlas, okay? So there's how you spell it. And it too is vertical. I promise you the last one is horizontal. So this one's more in the middle. Now, what's interesting about when we think of an atlas, we think of a big book that we open and we thumb through the pages. But the atlas that she experiences, that Constance experiences, is virtual. So she can go to the library and she can say, Sybil, take me to London. And she is transported to London virtually, and she can walk the streets of London Okay, now it's virtual, so most people's faces have been blurred out, I guess for privacy reasons, but they're so long that it wouldn't matter. If she goes to reach for something, her hand will go right through it. But she can give an idea of what everything looked like. Now, keep in mind, her parents were young people, were young adults when they boarded the spaceship. She wasn't even born yet. So she's never experienced anything but the Argos. So to be able to go to all of these places and walk around, you know, she can go to Turkey, she can go to Nigeria, she can go to Mexico, she can go to Lake Port, Idaho, she can go anywhere she wants, and she can walk around and see what it was like at that time. We don't know from Dor, he doesn't really tell us why they are, what happened on Earth that made them feel like they had to escape and go to a different planet. I mean, there are some suggestions of climate change. We know that the Earth was uninhabitable for some reason. It could have been climate change, it could have been war. There's a couple of suggestions it could have been war. And she does see some places where it looks, the vegetation looks different. Now, one interesting thing in this part is she's trying to find out, something happens, a catastrophe happens on the ship. And she is locked in the spot with Sybil. It's just her and Sybil. And she says, Sybil, I want to go to the library. I want to read Cloud Cuckoo Land. There is no Cloud Cuckoo Land. And she says, my dad read this. He knew this. I have no record of a Cloud Cuckoo Land. So she goes on a quest to find Cloud Cuckoo Land. And during this quest, she actually goes, she's trying to think where her dad, what references did he make to Australia when he grew up? What was the town? What was the place? She's going through all these, it takes her a while, but she eventually finds his town, and she could walk the streets until she finds what he described as his house. When she looks into his window, she sees a copy of the book on his nightstand. And so she knows, and so it becomes her personal quest to figure out where she can get that book. And she's also searching for answers, because why is she involved with Sybil? Why isn't she out with everybody else? So I'm going to end that part of the story there so that you can read it and find out. And that takes us to the last riddle, which is where can one check out books, magazines, DVDs, even cake pans? The library, Colby Library. Okay, and I put library on here because in each timeline, the library plays such an important part. Now, in the first one, the library's not been established. That Anna and her friend are selling these manuscripts, and these scholars are trying to build a library. So they're paying for them, they're building a library, and because of that, she gets Cloud Cuckoo Land, and she can help her sister. And then, of course, in the other two timelines, in Lake Port, Idaho, and in the Argos, the libraries are so important. And that's one reason he wrote the book, was to pay a tribute to librarians and libraries everywhere. So it's a really, really good book. Some people have said, is it confusing to follow those timelines? He does a really good job of telling you at the start of each chapter what setting you're in and the year. And so you can always page back. I listened to it on Audible, and I didn't have trouble with it. So I think it'd be easier with the actual book that you could page back and get straight all of that. And then you have that ancient Greek text that goes throughout too, that ties it all together. And it's pretty masterful how he does this. I think it's pretty cool. Okay, so then that takes me to my 5 almost reviewed books. And I do this because I think I always am looking for a new book, and I know I see so many book clubs in here, you guys are too. So I wanted to give you some other books. I'm not going to go into nearly the detail that I did with Cloud Cuckoo Land, but I'll tell you a little bit about some other books that I loved. Okay, so the first one is American Dirt, and the library does have a copy of this. And Lydia lives and owns a bookstore in Acapulco. She has a son, Luca, and a husband who's a journalist. But after her husband's tell-all profile of the newest drug lord is published, their lives change. Forcibly, Lydia and Luca try to reach the United States ahead of the cartel's long reach. This book was gripping. I could not put it down. I think I read it in 2 days, 2, maybe 3. My daughter Callie recommended it to me. She had read it first, and she said, "Mom, you have to read this book." The opening scene, Lydia and Luca are at her parents' house at her niece's quinceanera. And Luca has to go to the bathroom, so she takes her son Luca into the house to go to the bathroom. And while they're in the bathroom, they hear shooting, and they look out and they see the cartel is wiping out their family. And so they hide in a bathroom stall, in the bathroom shower. And a man comes in to see if anyone's in the house. He doesn't find them. So he leaves and they're just huddled there. And she can hear the men eating the chicken that her family had cooked and talking and laughing before they leave. She knows that she will be targeted because she knew the cartel leader. At her bookstore, this man had come in. She didn't know who he was. He was very well read, had the same type of book interest that she did. They struck up a friendship. And then she finds out from her husband, oh, he's the new drug lord. And so she knows that he knows everyone in her family. And if they come back and say, no, we didn't see the woman or the child, that he's going to come after her because of her husband's tell-all profile. So they have to try to get to the United States. And so it's a story, and they have to travel as migrants. They can't use credit cards or anything like that because he can track them down. So they just head out on their own. They have to rely on other people. They have to ride the top of the trains, which is how a lot of migrants go through Mexico. It's fascinating but terrifying. They have to stay in migrant camps. She sees the best of people. She sees the worst of people. It's really a good book. There is controversy about this book because Janine Cummins is a wealthy white woman who lives on the East Coast of the United States. And she was paid a large advance to publish this book. And there were a lot of people, Mexican people, different nationalities that said, why did she get to write that book? And does she know anything about this experience? They felt like she didn't show enough empathy for the characters. Some people thought maybe she sensationalized some of it. But in research, I found that she researched this topic for 4 years. She went to Mexico multiple times. She interviewed people. She saw how the migrants traveled on top of the trains. So I think it's worth your time to read. And then you can decide yourself. I found that the characters I had empathy for the characters. But I think it's worth the read. So once you get past that first thing, it's not nearly as violent. So don't let that scare you. I told you it happens anyway. So, okay, the second book I don't have a copy of because it's out on reserve in the library. It's Ken Follett's newest book called Never. Struggling to prevent the outbreak of World War in current times are a young intelligence officer, Chad, a spy working undercover with jihadists, a brilliant Chinese spy master, and Pauline Green, the American president. The novel delivers a visceral, heart-pounding read. This book, I was reading it when the first rumblings started coming out that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine. And as I'm reading this book, I thought, holy cow, this isn't timely. Because there are so many parts of it that show like the alliances between countries. And if someone attacks Japan and we're their allies, we are obligated to do something about it and vice versa. And I see this happening on the world stage and I'm thinking, wow, it's a very good book. You know, he loves to write espionage. He also wrote The Pillars of the Earth, the Cathedral stories, which I loved as well. And I love a good espionage story. I thought it was very, very good. But if you want to read that one, you'll have to get your name on the reserve list because there's still a pretty long list, I think, on that one. Okay, the third book is a littler book, Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. Auntie Flynn arrives in Scotland with her twin sister Aggie to lead a team of biologists tasked with reintroducing 14 gray wolves into the remote highlands. She hopes to heal not only the dying landscape, but Aggie too, unmade by the secrets that drove the sisters out of Alaska. So this one's set in the near future. Climate change has changed the environment of the Scottish Highlands. And so the biologists are there to reintroduce these gray wolves, which for me, this was one of my favorite parts of the story. It was so fascinating how they were trying to rehome those wolves. And of course, they're facing tremendous tension from the people who live there because most of them are farmers. They have cows, goats, and sheep. You can imagine they don't want wolves in their area. And so they encounter a lot of pushback from that. Another thing I thought was interesting about this book is that NT has a condition, this is a real condition, where if she sees someone in pain, whatever they're experiencing, she feels as if it's happening to herself. So if she sees someone's hand get cut, her hand feels like it's being cut as well. And so because of that, she has tried to somewhat isolate herself from people because she doesn't want to feel that pain when she sees those things happen. But she can't do that if she's trying to convince people that they have to let these wolves in. So that was a fascinating part of the story. And there's at one point, there's a farmer who is killed, and they think the wolves did it. And she is convinced that it wasn't one of her wolves, that she has to figure out who actually did this. And it might be the man that she's falling in love with. She doesn't want to think that, but it might be. So there's that mystery. So it's a really good book. If any of you have read Migrations, Charlotte McConaughey also wrote that. It's also about climate change. And they're making that into a movie, which is going to be out sometime soon. Okay, then The Light Through the Leaves. Oh, I love this book. Glendy Vanderrock wrote this book. One unbearable mistake at the edge of the forest. In a moment of crisis, Ellis leaves her baby unattended for just a few minutes. But when she returns, baby Viola is gone. In a remote area of Washington, a young girl named Raven spends her days learning to navigate her mother's strange rules and why they can't tell anyone their secrets. This book is a powerful journey of forgiveness and healing. So this book, I read this at least a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. I still think about this book. And maybe it's because I'm a mother, like most of you, that when she loses Viola, she can't deal with it. And so she ends up leaving her husband and her two older sons who are just, young. And what she does is she goes to nature. She goes to the mountains and she tries to find healing, answers. How could I do this? How could I love my baby? She's trying to find renewal. And Raven, the girl who lives in Washington, she lives in such a dysfunctional family. She doesn't even realize it's dysfunctional because her mother refuses to let her go to school until she's about middle school age. She homeschools her, and she tells her father is a raven, which is why she got the name the Raven. And she has no one, she believes her mother because she doesn't have anyone else to listen to. She also goes to nature. So she goes to nature to learn about the world. And it made me think of when the pandemic first hit in 2020 and everything was shut down. Our family would go like on Saturdays or Sundays. We would go somewhere, we would pack a lunch, and we go to the River Breaks up by St. Francis, or we go to Outwood Lake, we go to Antelope, to Scott Lake. We went to nature to find some hope, some peace. And so that's one reason why I love this book. But book, it takes through, and their stories are going to converge. It's an amazing story of forgiveness and healing. It's really good. And then Boy's Life, the last book. It's 1964 in idyllic Zephyr, Alabama. It's a simple life that stirs the impressionable imagination of 12-year-old aspiring writer Corey Mackinson. One morning, he and his dad see a car careening off the road into Saxon's Lake. His father dives into the icy water to rescue the driver and finds a beaten corpse, naked and handcuffed to the steering wheel, a copper wire tied around the stranger's neck. In time, the townsfolk forget all about the unsolved murder, but Corey and his father can't. So they have to try to figure this out. I'm not sure how I missed this book. This is an old book. It's published in 1991. I had never heard of Robert McCammon. I had never heard of Boy's Life. And I came across this book in the last year. And I thought, how did I not know this book? How did I not hear about this book? Well, upon reflection, I thought, I did have 3 children at age 3 and under. Maybe that's why I missed that book. But this book is more than just a mystery. That they can't figure out why the authorities aren't wanting to solve this crime, this mystery. There's a lot involved in it. But what I loved about the book, I loved the mystery, that part, but I loved even more. It's titled Boy's Life for a reason. It's about a boy in a small town, riding his bike, going to the store for his mom. He wants to go to tell the police something. He rides his bike down to the police station. It's all about the boy's life and how he knows he can solve this mystery. He has that child's optimism and the belief that there's something good in everybody, even though maybe he's scared of someone, he thinks there has to be good. There's also a correlation between a neighboring town, which is a town of mostly Black people, and the town that he lives in and their interactions, which is a very cool part of the story. And it's 1964, so there's some prejudice there. And it's also set in the South, so there's a little bit of that Southern fiction. vibe, which I really like. So I love this book. And like I said, it's no longer even, Melody said she couldn't even order it for the library. She tried to get a copy of it. She couldn't order it. So I have a copy. So if any of you would like to read this book, I'm sure, and you can get it on Audible or something like that. I think Callie, my daughter, wants to read it first, but if you'll leave me your name and number today, I would happy to loan you my copy. And I can just send it all around town. You know, everyone can read it if you want to. So I hope that through the last 45 minutes, you've heard something about at least one book that you think, oh, I like that book. I've given you 6 options because I do think books are so important. And that's one reason why I wanted to review How to Plant, because I know the power of books in my life. And so I just wanted to give, I tried to come up with 5 different types of books to appeal to different types of readers. So I hope there's something in there for all of you. Okay, thank you so much for coming.
What you almost reviewed.
Oh, no, the American Dirt is one I almost reviewed today. The American Dirt, this is one I almost reviewed today. Another book that I almost reviewed, another book that I had on my list originally for my finals review was Sully, which is what the PML Book Club is reading right now. They're going to talk about it Monday night. That's an excellent book by John Grisham. Not a legal drama like his usual. It's more of a college basketball drama, and which I love college basketball too. So, yeah. Did anyone have questions about How to Plant or comments? I know there are people in here who have read the book or are reading the book. Okay, well, yes.
I came to the library bookstore last Saturday, whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I bought a book. When I buy books, the books of the cover.
Uh-huh.
And I bought this book, went home and read it, and come back the next day and bought the next 40 of them. So I don't need your book.
You got reading material for a while, yes. What was the name of the book? The book that you bought? Or the name of the series? You don't know? I'd be interested in knowing. Thank you all for coming. Have a great day. Enjoy the weather.